Hello everyone, I'm back with another analysis video and this time around is Lil Happy with Kiseki no Uta. What is Lil Happy and what am I talking about in here? Lil Happy is a group part of the Aopella franchise. Aopella is a mixed media project by K-Lab that is all about a cappella music, which is to say, there is no instrumental going on in this song. The instrumental is basically the voices of the voice actors. So this is something that may be really different for you, especially if you're not used to listening to a cappella music. And if you are, this is going to be a treat because Lil Happy, just like Fame in the Aopella franchise, is an awesome group with really skilled vocalists in its lineup. So let's kick this off before I get really excited and not review the song, but instead talk about the project. Ryuto Saka, that is doing those clean notes on top of the choir, is actually giving off a 60s or 70s vibe from soul music, which is something that I love. And the choir is really bassy, contrasting with those really high notes. It's worth mentioning that Lil Happy is a group that is mainly comprised of tenors. They have two baritones and the rest of the group is tenors. Mainly their music will sound really high, and that's because of that. Those are mainly tenors in the group. The bass singer is Tomoaki Maino, and is not really necessarily a bass when he sings, he's a baritone, but he's dabbling on bass because he can go that low. And you have Tetsuya Kakihara that can actually dabble both to tenor and bass range and baritone. So he can do a little bit of everything. Usually for Lil Happy songs he is a baritone, but if you need him, he will go that high or that low to support the member that needs to be supported, which is pretty impressive. Leading the way you have Ryuto Saka, and you have as well Ryohei Kimura and Ken in this lineup. Are you ready? I am. Let's go as far as we can. 何も知らない君を教えてよ一つずつ最近ほら歌いたくなった歌を I'm not necessarily used to listening to Ken singing in such a youthful tone. He's usually known for being a singer that is incredibly flashy and usually is in charge of performing parts with a bit more allure or maturity to them. So this is an interesting change of tone and a contrasting way to his performances, because he usually goes for those robust, raspy notes that leave a lot of allure in his wake. Not necessarily sound this preppy, but that's the fit, of course, the group and the tone of the song. Interesting thing, Ryohei Kimura, up until very recently, I should say 2 years ago, he was not necessarily a good singer, but he's grown so much that he's now not only a good singer, but able to perform in a cappella and lead the way. You'll usually find him actually sounding even better than Ryuto Saka, that is the center or the main vocal in this group. He's the main tenor. So that's an interesting thing to add. Of course, this lineup actually has plenty of underrated singers in comparison to Fame that has plenty of top tier singers. In this case, you have two singers that I've been following a lot since basically the start of the website. which is to say Tetsuya Kakihara and Ryohei Kimura, and they have completely changed the way they sing from being completely unreliable solo or within the groups they were to being the members that are the most consistent in the projects they are in, which is really impressive. In terms of growth, it's really impressive. Ryohei Kimura has a raspy voice tone, but it necessarily goes to those high notes and it can be a baritone if need be. So there's that. And then you have Tetsuya Kakihara that can actually perform 3 different vocal ranges. Of course, bass will be a 4 range and tenor will be slightly 4 range because he's mainly a baritone with a bit of a tenor range in there, or on the contrary, a tenor with a really low range that taps into baritone. So you have that. Those 2 singers have grown a lot. They are now a force to be reckoned with, which is from a standpoint of someone that has been following them through the point in which they were, I wouldn't say bad singers, but really weak as singers, and now they are so powerful, so emotional, so technical. It's really something that puts a smile on my face because I love to see growth and I love to see voice actors evolving and turning into the best version of themselves. And as singers, both Ryohei Kimura and Tetsuya Kakihara have grown a whole lot. And here you hear them in this song and you are baffled by their technique, because Ryohei Kimura is not expected to be at the front when he sings because he is actually the 2nd or the 3rd position, I'm not really sure. And Tetsuya Kakihara, of course, is the 4th position within the group, so is not really in the spotlight whatsoever, but both end up standing out because of their unique singing tones and their skill. They have a lot of power going on in their voice, which is impressive. In case you guys haven't noticed, in the background, performing a massive bass line is Tomoaki Maino. He's really doing a fantastic job at keeping the pace going on in this song so that everyone can groove on top of it. Let's There's something that people usually say about Tetsuya Kakihara, is that he's a one-dimensional singer because he sings always with the same tone. Yes, that's a thing. And he usually doesn't change much his singing tone for both his solo work and work for 2D music projects. But that's because, of course, no one asks him to do something different, so there's that. But he does really well with the singing tone he has, and he doesn't need to pull off anything flashy. If you noticed, he's doing some legato, some breathy notes, which is a characteristic of his style of singing. He's really, really breathy. He's a kind of singer that is half hair, half sound, which is really interesting to see. Not easy to pull off. And he's adding a little bit of vibrato to his notes as well. So he's doing a little bit of everything. He's adding a mature touch to this song, something that, for example, when I talked about earlier, Ken wasn't doing at all. He was actually doing the opposite to give a youthful vibe to this song. Tomoaki Maino went from comfortable baritone notes, already low, and he started to slow those and lower those. And when he wraps up his part, he's already well deep into bass range, which is impressive. Once again, he's one of the vocal chameleons in the Seiyu industry. If you've heard his performances with Quartet Night, there's actually one song that he's performing with two voice tones. Excuse me because I don't really know the name of the song, but I've watched the performance and I was mesmerized. He's a singer that can pull off a multitude of things. He's extremely underrated, which is weird because he actually sings really well. He's really stable as a singer, really consistent in his performances, and he can sound natural within a range that is not his natural one. He's not really a bass type of singer. He can pull off bass, as you can hear, and he really does it really well. But it is impressive, and one thing that was happening there in the chorus as Ryota Osaka was going really high on his notes was the contrast with Tomoaki Maino's low notes. He was really punching those bassy notes there as Ryota Osaka was going really high. That contrast there with the choir in the middle is really the cherry on top of the cake. That sounds really, really well. The chorus sounds incredibly satisfying due to that. It complements everything, covers everything, and no one is overlapping, which is pretty impressive in terms of mixing of this song. 信じるのは怖いけど信じなければ進めない覚悟はいかい The choir in the background is going through canons, which is to say those beautiful sections in which someone is completing the endings of the words of the other person. They are chained, which is really interesting. And then they are harmonizing in the second part, the part in which I've stopped the song right now. So the choir is doing a pretty good job in making the song have dynamic, especially when you don't have an instrumental. It's really hard to keep up with the dynamic and tone and the tempo consistently, unless you're really making a massive effort into reminding yourself of tempo and going for that 4/4 beat or 3/4 beat, depending on what you want to achieve. But that's really interesting, those canons and then the harmonizations that follow those. 知らぬ間にめくられてくカレンダーに焦るけどドキドキと体の BPM 上がってくノリが気持ちいいよね君のせいだ忘れない初めて一緒に歌った歌は Stand by me 世界でたった一人君だ代わりなんていない Stand by you 君と重ねたこの歌声がずっと探していた歌いたかった歌 That's a good long note. 忘れない初めて一緒に歌った歌は Oh Stand by me さよなら見てるだけの日々君に伝えた Stand by me 主役は誰だ僕たちだ僕から君へ Stand by you いざ行こう一つ奇跡の歌だ Stand by you Stand by you Are you ready? Let's go as far as we can Ooh, that R&B riffing. So that was R&B riffing to wrap up that song, which is wow. I told you when I was talking about Tetsuya Kakihara a couple of minutes ago that he's actually grown a lot, and R&B riffing is something he can pull off with a lot of ease, and you have him riffing those last notes beautifully, and with a really warm tone that I love about him. This song, it almost feels like cheating because they are all good singers, and you really can't say, oh, this singer was performing better than the other, because they are all good singers. Of course, one thing that I feel with Little Happy is that on all songs they released so far, Ken is almost inaudible. He ends up stuck in the background for all songs. Besides the individual part he had, or the parts he had, you don't really hear him much because Ryota Osaka is really going high and really intense. I don't know if you noticed, but his attack on the notes is really sharp. Ha! He enters those notes really, really hard and really, really fast, which isn't expected in a cappella. Still, it works, but his attack on those notes is a little bit intense, or more intense than usual. And then you have Ryohei Kimura that usually covers the same range as Ken, and Tetsuya Kihara in a way also covers that range. So Ken ends up a bit buried in the background. That's what I feel as a listener. Of course, if I'm going to go really technical, I would say it's because it was requested of him to perform in that high range, and he ends up clashing with the two tenors, the two main tenors of the group, which is to say Ryota Osaka and Ryohei Kimura. He ends up, of course, complementing. You can listen to him in the background. A couple of notes he will, of course, stand out. In some notes he will stand out. He's got really mellow high notes, contrasting with Ryota Osaka's sharp high notes. So he really tends to stand out in those endings of the notes, not necessarily when they are performing as a whole, which is, once again, weird. But still, all singers in this group are really good. Once again, I will say it feels like cheating when you are listening to this with this group or even Fame, because all singers were chosen for a purpose. They are the best at their positions and the best available in their positions and willing to join this project. So you have really, really good lineups in both sides. Of course, I am talking about Lil Happy. I'm not going to talk more about Fame. Lil Happy is a group that, of course, is mainly comprised of tenors. Tenor range is the highest that a man can have. Usually tenors are the singers that belt and go for high notes in the head voice or even falsetto, but they can also dabble a bit in baritone range. Not necessarily a natural one, but they can do that. Then you have two skilled singers that are in the baritone range. One of them can actually go for really natural bass notes, while the other can go for bass notes but not necessarily natural, or not necessarily sounding natural. So I'm talking about Tomoaki Maino, that can achieve those bassy notes that you listen in that bass line going on in the song from start to finish. And then you have Tetsuya Kihara that can dabble to help Tomoaki or to cover for anything that is needed on the tenor side. Of course, their sound also has that youthful vibe, so it helps to have a higher toned lineup, because that conveys that sense of youth. That's really well put together. The group is really well put together. They fit the concept and they work pretty well as a unit. I was not expecting this when the project was announced early on this year, but they are really, really good. And this is my favorite song of Lil Happy, Kiseki no Uta, because of how consistent, how cohesive they sound, and how they can have that preppier edge, that bright outlook at things, and still have I would say a matured sound, or a rather mature sound to their a cappella performance. This is a group that is actually pretty interesting to listen to. Their music, once again, if you have paid attention to this video, they do not have any instruments playing in the background. It's just the Seiyu and their microphone, no addition whatsoever in their voice. which is pretty impressive. They are good singers, extremely underrated. For one, you have Ryota Osaka that, if you ask someone who are their favorite singers among voice actors, I reckon no one will mention him. He's a really good role singer, and he's actually surprising me because I was not expecting he would have a leading role within an a cappella group, more of a supporting role. I was expecting Ryohei Kimura to actually lead the way because he's more complete as a singer, but he doesn't have that much of a strong attack in his high notes or go that high as Osaka can go, which is surprising. Once again, this is a lineup that is really interesting. You have tricky sections within the song that are pulled off with an ease that you wouldn't expect. You have a bass line that is otherworldly. How Tomoaki Maino can pull that off for the duration of the song, I would be pretty much tired by the first minute. And then you have the rest of the lineup that does an amazing job, either from the harmonizations going on in the background or when they go for their solo parts. They are really, really good. That's all from me. Kiseki no Uta by Lil Happy is a beautiful song. It has a really good warm tone. It actually fits this season, so if you want to feel a little bit in the Christmas mood, this song actually fits this vibe. A cappella music always fits this vibe. At least I feel like it does. Lil Happy's Kiseki no Uta was a suggestion by Zanel, and a really good one. I really wanted to talk about Aopella, so I was really happy to find a suggestion within this franchise to talk about. And this was my analysis slash reaction video to Kiseki no Uta by Lil Happy. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys soon.